Welcome to Flashpoint, everybody. I'm Jason Colthorpe. Let's set the lineup for this Sunday morning. Batting leadoff is the man trying to reverse a 30-year trend. Republican Senate candidate Mike Rogers is up first this morning, and then we'll explain pot for potholes. Amy Barzy of Cranes and dispensary owner Jay Snipes are here to break down the new 24% tax on marijuana, and we're going to hit four big headlines from the week that was. All ahead on this October 12th edition of Flashpoint. Not since 1994 has Michigan elected a Republican to serve in the U.S. Senate. Spence Abraham, by the way, if you were scoring at home. With Congressman Bill Huizenga deciding against a run, Mike Rogers appears to have the Republican primary all to himself. Last year, he ran and lost in a very close race to Alyssa Slotkin. This time, he's facing the winner of Mallory McMorrow, Abdul El Sayed, and Haley Stevens. So those are just the Democrats in the race at this point. After a quiet start to the race, Rogers made some noise recently in calling on the president to send National Guard troops to Detroit to help fight crime, like we've seen elsewhere around the nation. Let's ask him about that and other issues important to Michigan right now on Flashpoint. Former Michigan Congressman Mike Rogers at the table this morning. Good to have you. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I mentioned in the intro, it had been 30 years since a Republican has won in Michigan. Why do you think that is, by the way?
Well, I just don't think the Republicans have been making their case to go in the state Senate, or excuse me, the U.S. Senate. But I'll tell you why that's a problem. So in that 30 years, Michigan has gone backwards. And so we've had two Democrats representing the state for 30 years in the United States Senate. We've lost manufacturing. Our education went from top 10 to 44 in the country. We still have four of the most dangerous cities in the top dangerous cities in the country list. We've got a lot of work to do, and doing the same thing over and over isn't going to do it. So I think we need a change in the U.S. Senate.
You're very familiar with the voters, ran last year and lost a very close race, but you were on the same ballot that Trump won, and you lost. This time you'll be running on the ballot in a midterm year where traditionally the party opposite the White House struggles. So how do you overcome that?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. We have an open governor's race, and that is drawing a lot of excitement. I mean, we have had 8 years of pretty... If you're in the small business community, you've been crushed in the last 8 years. And again, that 30,000 manufacturing jobs we lost was since 2019. So we have lost people, we have lost manufacturing, our education has dropped, crime has gone up. And so I think people are ready for a change in the governor's race, and they're excited, I think, for a change in the United States Senate, somebody that's going to be pro-job, somebody that's going to be able to put coalitions together to fight crime. We've got some answers for education, and why wouldn't we send somebody back that can walk into the Oval Office of the United States and say, this is what Michigan needs? The good news is the president loves Michigan. He won Michigan twice. Why aren't we working with him to do good things in Michigan? What we have now is everybody just wants to poke him in the eye.
Mentioned crime. I want to talk about that, but you also said we got some ideas for education. What ideas? Because you're right, we've covered that on this show many times. Michigan kids really near the bottom when it comes to test scores.
Yeah, and 60% of fourth graders in Michigan can't read at the fourth grade level. Right. Why that's so dangerous? If you can't read in the fourth grade by the fourth grade, you have a 70% chance of being on welfare or going to prison.
So what's the plan?
So the plan is two things from the federal side. One is we use Title I money today for schools that are struggling, and they tend to be, economically diverse communities. So we use that money today very ineffectively. I want that money to go to a remediation plan for in the third grade for preparing students for the fourth grade, meaning you've got to get those kids ready for fourth grade. Use that money over the summer in third grade, and don't pass them from the third grade to the fourth grade if they can't read, because you're sentencing that child to a life of poverty. And so that's one of the ways we do it. The other way is there's a lot of parents out there over the last 15 years. We've been graduating kids that can't read at the 8th grade level, and they have degrees or high school diplomas. And so what I want to do is require people who are on government assistance, we want to help you. There's now work requirements, good thing. But right before you get to that work requirement, take a reading assessment. And this is really important for those fourth graders. Reading assessment, we're going to help you. It's a 6 to 14-week course. It uses phonics to get you up to school reading. And so you're going to upskill their parents. And by the way, their parents can now read to their kids. One of the biggest problems we find is parents aren't reading material because their reading skills are a little lacking. So you get it from both ends. You start getting kids reading. I think that solves a lot of the other problems.
You recently called for National Guard troops to be deployed to cities like Detroit. You mentioned Detroit specifically. How do you think, and your law enforcement background, how do you think someone in the National Guard could help fight crime in a city like Detroit?
Yeah, and what I called for was the mayor to call the president and ask for help on the crime problem we have in Detroit, and up to and including National Guard if they thought that that was the right way to go. So what happened in Washington, D.C. is a great template in my mind. The National Guard was not enforcing the laws. They were providing presence on the streets. That reduced crime. Then they followed up with really aggressive task force on FBI, DEA, Marshal Service to go in and get the worst criminals off the street, and crime plummeted. They went into Memphis, and why I called for Detroit. Detroit is the second most dangerous city in the country. Memphis is number one. So the first week they had kind of that surge of law enforcement into Memphis, crime went down. Why would we accept in this two cities what we have here? And if you look at the mayor's race, they're talking about the two-city problem in Detroit. This helps get to the two-city problem. Those people should have safe communities too.
The mayor's office did respond to that, by the way. At least it responded to me when I asked. Quote, Rogers is proving himself just another uninformed grandstanding politician. In 2013, the city of Detroit had more than 750 carjackings. In 2025, we had 57 as of yesterday. There's a few weeks ago, a 90% reduction. They call it a historic drop in crime. Reaction to that?
Carjackings. One of the ways that you judge about how dangerous your city is aggravated assaults. It's robberies. It's rape. Aggravated assaults, Detroit is about 400% higher than the national average. I'm glad that they got a category. And by the way, one of the reasons that went down, you had a whole community approach going after the carjacking problem. We lost a police officer going after the carjacking problem last year. An Oakland sheriff was killed in the line of duty when they were targeting these carjacking crews. And it shows that you can emphasize a particular crime. What if we go after crime and aggravated assault and drug dealing and human trafficking? And their answer, his answer also was, and this is why you have two cities in this city. One place you can't go, and there's an area of, 15 square blocks that's fantastic, and I love it. This is great. I'm long on Detroit. Yeah. But I want every Detroiter to benefit from this. Why wouldn't we take advantage of a president who wants to help? So, Mr. Mayor, you don't have to, and I've told the mayor, I'll help you write the plan to get more law enforcement to give these communities back. If you could save 100 people, wouldn't you do it?
You're aligned with the president on that. I know you're aligned with the president on immigration, but is there anywhere you disagree? Like maybe the way, what do you take as the way ICE agents are going about apprehending potential illegals? Sometimes they are not illegal, not being deported, but masks on, sometimes descending onto buildings, at least we've seen in Chicago with Black Hawk helicopters. Do you agree with that?
Well, listen, the one problem we just had an overwhelmingly open border. Millions and millions of people. The last 4 years have been devastating for America when it comes to crime in neighborhoods. So they had a really tough job. You're asking these ICE agents to stop what was an absolute open border, and we saw gang crime, we saw drug increases, we saw human trafficking increases.
Sometimes we see innocent children and families in zip ties, but are you okay with, and then later released?
They disputed the zip ties for children. And by the way, the Democrats are calling children 17-year-olds. If you've seen 17-year-old gang activity in Detroit, you're not calling them children.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just disingenuous.
Okay.
So you've asked them to do a really hard job. And look at them. They're getting harassed by other gangs. There's other external activities harassing these ICE agents for enforcing the law of the United States. And why do they have to do it in this way? Is because of that open border policy under the Democrats in the last 4 years. Millions, not hundreds of thousands, not 10,000, millions of people cross that border. And we've got a huge spike in crime around the country to show for it, including organized criminal activity. And that's dangerous work. And listen, I was a street agent in Chicago going after organized crime, which also included street gangs, gang violence. It's dangerous work. Yeah. And by the way, we need to be supporting the police, not calling to defund them or throwing rocks at them. If everyone cooperated, you could get the bad guys out. And I think this presents a huge opportunity to actually go to a working visa program that works for America. It's safe. It's a lot easier, and then you don't have the same enforcement problem.
Let me get your thoughts on the shutdown. I have 30 seconds. If you were in the Senate today, what would your message be for Republicans and Democrats to end the shutdown?
Well, first of all, Congress, if you can't pass a budget by October 1st every year, you shouldn't get paid. Pure and simple. I'll guarantee you they'll get a budget done by October 1st, number one. But number two, the Democrats voted 5 times to close it down. There's a Social Security office not far from here. That's shut down. Yeah. That means seniors who are having a hard time getting their check aren't getting their check, and it's only for political purposes. Chuck Schumer said the longer this goes, he thinks it's better for Democrats. That is the most malicious way to look at this. Military personnel are getting ready to lose their checks. Law enforcement, there's a 700% increase, by the way, in attacks on law enforcement. Guess what? They're not going to get their checks next week. That's wrong.
Republican candidate for Senate, Mike Rogers, appreciate your time this morning. I'm sure we're going to talk again. More Flashpoint right after this. Back here on Flashpoint to talk pot for potholes. Catchy slogan that came out of the budget agreement, which added a 24% wholesale tax on marijuana to help pay for road repairs. But the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association filing a lawsuit fighting that tax. Let's talk about that with Amy Barzy, Assistant Managing Editor at Cranes, and Jay Snipes, who's the owner of West Coast Meds, a recreational marijuana provider. Thanks for being here to talk about this. I think this is a huge issue. Amy, let me just start with you. Where do we stand with this lawsuit and what I guess it's based on?
Yeah, the lawsuit was filed just minutes after this was signed into law. So the industry, biggest industry association in the state was ready to go, was ready to file. Right now, it's still pending. And we do expect, from what we're hearing, that it will go all the way to the Supreme Court in the state of Michigan because of the merits of the lawsuit. So it was filed basically on the fact that Michigan law for legal cannabis was voter approved. Right. And any changes to that law would require a supermajority or a 3/4 vote to change the law when it comes to taxes.
Per the Constitution.
Correct, right. Yeah. So it's our understanding that didn't happen during the budget process. We had a simple majority vote to pass the budget that included the new weed tax.
I don't know if anybody's asked the governor, but do you think they ran it by someone? Maybe did the kind of like, let's ask the Supreme Court what they might do, or the AG to kind of feel that out first? Or
that's a great question. And honestly, Governor Whitmer has been fairly quiet, I think, about this new tax and its implications on the industry.
Yeah, I did ask the governor about this tax, and Jay, you could tell there was a look on her face, kind of like, she cringed when I mentioned it. And when I asked the Republicans about it, they didn't even want this tax, they say. When you see this, and it comes on top of a 6% tax and a 10% excise tax, so now we're talking 40% for your business and other businesses like that. What does that do to you?
It drains us. Yeah, we're already a struggling market because of the 280E form. Federally, we pay 70% taxes. Unlike other businesses, we're not allowed to write things off.
Well, explain that. So you can't write off any business expenses?
Not at all.
Which means you pay 70% in federal tax?
Yes. That doesn't include state and city. That's just federal. So it's already a struggling market.
If I'm doing my math, you're saying 110% tax, which means you're already in the red.
Yes, we'll be operating in the red, and businesses will begin to close. The market will begin to have a downfall.
What have you heard? I mean, I don't know, I guess what it does to your business, but certainly the smaller ones feel like this really puts an onus upon them here.
All of us, from larger corporations even to smaller ones. is a little chaotic in the cannabis industry right now. Everyone is scrambling, trying to figure out their next move. So everyone is in the uproar from small to large.
Does it feel like you've been singled out here? I mean, with this, because, and I'll ask you about this, Amy, too. It felt like this tax came out of nowhere. I mean, they were ready to file this lawsuit, so somebody was ready, but do you feel like you're being singled out?
Absolutely. It did feel like it came out of nowhere. We was unaware. We heard of it, and we first heard of it at 32%. Then we lobbied about it, and we didn't know that the vote was coming that fast. We didn't have any idea, but once we found out about the issue, we did go down to Lansing, and we had a lobby day and tried to speak with several senators, and it seemed like majority of them was against it. So the fact that it passed really shocked the industry.
The budget director did hint that the governor originally wanted more than this, so 32 I think is accurate, Amy, and just it does it could really reshape the whole industry in the state.
Absolutely. I think pot for potholes is an attractive phrase, and I think it's a $3 billion industry, and on the surface it looks very profitable. It's also not taxed at the same rate as other sin taxes like alcohol and tobacco are, and that's where the 32% came from. That's the tax that's applied to tobacco products.
Right.
So yeah, it did seem to come up fairly quickly as we were waiting for news of the road deal. And I think the industry is just slightly more complicated than maybe some of the lawmakers are giving it credit for right now. The revenue projection from both the House and Senate on this bill was $420 million in the first year, which is something to be questioned. I don't think we've seen the math on where that revenue projection comes from. And it certainly references the 420 cannabis holiday that we all know.
I don't know if that was accidental, but when I saw 420 million, you're laughing. I mean, it can't be. It's not funny, but it's funny.
Right.
Yeah.
I have to be honest. I haven't met many people that's in our industry that are colleagues that own other dispensaries that are millionaires.
Right.
And a lot of them has put their entire life in it, life savings, thinking that that was the outcome. But once you're in it, you realize that there's a lot more to it in it. So I wish there would have been more of a discussion with the people that were on the ground before that law passed, and then they would have seen the actual numbers.
People who don't use, and it's not just smoking here, we're talking about, there are a zillion products. It could be gummies, it could be drinks, it could be a lot of different things. But I think what the younger generation would say is a lot of younger people don't drink anymore, and they sometimes will use weed this way. Do you fear, and I want to ask you both this, that this it could put people, it could basically send weed back to the black market?
Absolutely. It definitely will send weed back to the black market. Because if you go in now, or once the tax applies, for a $10 bag, you'll end up paying $14 when you can go down the street with no taxes. And some people just don't have that. They rarely mention that it affects mental illness, that it affects people with breast cancer.
Medical, I left out the medical part of this, yeah.
The epilepsy and several other diagnoses that people have that actually need this as a medicine. So yes, you have your recreational users who do it to relax or whatever the reason, their personal reason is, but you also still have that group that does it because they actually need it.
And it was really sold to the voters originally as a way to kind of end the black market kind of maneuvering. And I have less than a minute, but Amy, let me ask, regarding the lawsuit, taxation was kind of in the original title of that 2018 Law to the People. Does that help the state's case?
Slightly, but I think really it comes down to that constitutional question.
Right.
Like, did the legislature override the will of the voters when it comes to the constitutional definition of what that tax is?
Yes.
So that's left to the court to decide for right now.
Yeah, and we'll have to wait and see. And hopefully this, like we talk about, doesn't, if it does go through, we hope it doesn't send things kind of back to the streets. And like you say, people going down the street for something that they can get in a store legally
and it's
right
safe.
now. Yeah.
Right.
Ladies, thanks so much for being with us this morning. Appreciate it. Certainly something we'll be keeping our eye on. More Flashpoint coming up after this. Four headlines from this week I want to cover before we go. And obviously an apparent ceasefire between Israel and Hamas tops that list. Meet the Press will have much more on that in just a few minutes. Locally, we have an update to our interview with AG Dana Nessel a couple of months back. She talked about her investigation into the former head of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, Faye Baydoun, and the $20 million grant she got during the 2022 budget process. Nessel saying both the MEDC and Baydoun were stonewalling her investigation. Well, Governor Whitmer was asked about where things stand this week.
The legislature put the grant into the budget. It was very different than the way that the budget was proposed by my office. Ultimately, when the legislature said this is how we're going to spend the money, the assumption was that it was going to be, and I don't know whose assumption it was on, but that the chamber was going to be one of the recipients. It was a surprise to all of us that that wasn't the case, and I think that that's one additional point of why this is so unusual and why it's my hope that the Attorney General initiates a lawsuit to get the money back from Faye Baydoun. I don't know why that hasn't happened yet. It's long overdue.
Have you asked her to do that?
I haven't talked directly with her on this, but she has, yes, I believe that that has been communicated.
We will obviously let you know more when we get further updates from there. All right, this story jumped out earlier this week from Beth LeBlanc and the Detroit News. State Rep Karen Whitsitt, a Democrat from Detroit, has been absent from 51 of 66 House sessions this year. Or to put it another way, Whitsitt has been a no-show 77% of the time at the Capitol, and that includes the key budget votes last week. In fact, she was the only lawmaker to miss those votes. She told the News, most days the activities happening at the Capitol aren't worth the cost of traveling to Lansing. Whitsitt, by the way, is currently running for a city council seat in Detroit. From Bridge, Michigan this week, an issue that might show up in next year's gubernatorial race. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson appears to have lost oversight of her own IT system under this new budget that was just signed. Republicans fought to and appear to have won, taking that control away from her after what many called a flawed rollout of the new transparency portal for campaign finance and lobbying disclosures. And finally, Michigan lost one of its most notable former members of Congress this week. Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick died at the age of 80. She was a teacher for Detroit schools before running for state office, serving in the State House beginning in 1978 for 9 terms. She won a seat in Congress in 1996, becoming the second black woman to serve in the U.S. House, and she was the first on the House Appropriations Committee. The wind in her political sails, though, waned significantly in 2008 when her son Kwame Kilpatrick resigned as mayor of Detroit amid his scandal that we all know, and she lost re-election in 2010. Still, Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick will long be remembered as a fierce advocate for the city of Detroit. That's our show, everybody. Feel free to drop me a note anytime on this week's episode or whatever else is on your mind. Flashpoint at clickondetroit.com is where to get me. And don't forget, the Lions are on Sunday Night Football right here on Local 4 tonight. Big pregame and postgame coverage as the boys try to take down the Chiefs. Let's go, Lions. I'm Jason Colthorpe. We'll see you later.